Good evening, everybody, and welcome to The Gathering Church. My name is Will, and tonight we are doing something a little different and very special, actually. We are continuing the conversation from this past Wednesday when Pastor Brad and Pastor Stephanie had a panel and we were discussing race and social injustice and different things like that. And so I had a call this week with Pastor Brad, Pastor Steph, Pastor Brian, and we talked about doing the same thing again with a younger audience. Not calling any of you that were on stage old. Pastor Brad, I love you. Pastor Steph, I love you. Anyways, we thought it would be cool to have a younger audience speak and let their voices be heard and share their experiences and different things like that. So I have invited some of my really cool friends and people from the Gathering Church tonight to share in this conversation on race and social injustice and the Black experience here in the United States. So let's just set some ground rules, right? There will probably be some people who are watching this tonight and you have a few questions. You may say, do you support cops? Yes. We all support cops. We know there are good cops, but tonight, this conversation is not about the good cops. Tonight, the cops that are being addressed are the cops who mishandle their power and who have taken the lives of Black people. You may be watching this and you may be saying, your church, why are we talking politics? Why are we talking all these different things? Well, as the church, it's our job. It's our responsibility to be the change in the world and to bring Jesus into the communities. You may also be saying, but this is my favorite, all lives matter. And while yes, all lives do matter, tonight specifically, we're going to be talking about the Black ones, the brown ones, whose lives have been unjustly taken by the hands of police brutality. And so we're going to share our stories. We're going to dive into some really deep conversation. I don't want you to leave. I want you to stay. I want you to watch. I want you to share this. If you can, share it on your stream. Send the link to somebody and let them know what we have going on. So we're going to dive right in. We're going to get started. How y'all doing tonight? Good. Good. Y'all sound excited to be here. So I'm really excited. So one thing that I think is really cool, too, that was different from Wednesday is that we have a lot of different races in the room, right? We have Blacks, we have whites, we have my Hispanic brothers, right? There's all people in the room, so I think that's really cool to hear different perspectives from different races. One question as I was preparing for this, and I was kind of like, Lord, how can we get this thing started? What can we start with? And so I want to ask all of my Black people, when I say the Black experience in America, or the Black struggle really is what it is in America, what does that mean for you? Anybody, whenever you're ready. Yeah.
I guess I can start. So, I guess my experience has always sort of been just like something of like people expecting something of me, like expecting to be a certain way. And I don't know, I've always sort of been like too white for the Black kids, too Black for the white kids type of thing. So always in the middle. And I think like whenever I walk into a room or like I talk to certain people, they like expect me to be a certain way or like try to like address me a certain way, and it's just kind of like uncomfortable sometimes, or just like I don't even know like what to do. So that's my experience.
Yeah, I was talking to Will earlier, and we were talking about how you can have so many accolades as an African American. Both my parents are doctors, and I'm going to like a really good school. In 2 months, Ian is going to a really good school in 2 months, and I bet a lot of you guys have a lot of great accolades too, but you're always kind of seen as a Black person first, and people expect you to be a certain way, or talk a certain way, or look a certain way, and those accolades sometimes like don't matter,
Yeah. Ashley?
Well, I grew up like this, where there's a lot of diversity in the schools that I went to. So I feel privileged to be able to do that, because I used to just have friends from different perspectives and races and stuff. But just growing up and being a Black woman in America, my name's Ashley. So so I will talk to people on the phone, and I will go into these establishments and they know my name before they know my face. And when they say Ashley, and I'm like, yes, me. And some people look at me like, that shouldn't be your name because you're Black. Yeah. And it's like, I don't know how to feel. Like, that's just who I am. And like he said, like, people have an expectation of you just because you're Black. You speak well. Well, I should be able to speak well. I do articulate because I'm educated, but why is that an exception to you? Why is that not the norm for us? Why do you only see us as maybe some people who aren't educated? Because there's educated people who are white, there's educated people who are Black, there's non-educated people who are white, there's non-educated people who are Black. So, I just feel it would be good just to be seen as Ashley and not Black girl and then Ashley.
Wow.
That's
wow.
That is facts.
Well, I think I can piggyback off of what Ashley was saying. And for me, it's sort of different because I was raised on a Caribbean island. I wasn't always raised in America. So the Black experience was sort of like a culture shock for me. When I moved here at 18 and, and someone told me that, I'm naming my kid this name because when they're going into an interview, they won't have a problem. And when I moved here, I didn't understand what they meant by that, because I was coming from eating fish and plantains every day, and everybody kind of looked like me, even if they were lighter skinned or whatever. There were white people who lived on the Caribbean island where I was from, but it was never an issue. It was not like an underlining issue. It was not like something that wasn't spoken. It was just a non-issue. Race was just not a big thing. And so moving here in America and having to go on an interview, and like Ashley was saying, they saw my name, they saw the accolades, and they were like, oh, great candidate. She even offered me the job on email. And I got there, and she was like, I'm sorry, I misspoke. And that actually happened to me a few years ago. And so it was a huge culture shock. It was a huge experience coming from one part to another, and kind of living this Black experience out in America. It was just completely a shock to me that I'm currently still trying to process and deal with every day. So that's happened.
So, for those of you who don't know, Tiff is my wife, and she's always like, don't call on me. No, but I think you could speak to this because just career-wise, you typically, you were at a place, for the last 5 years or so?
Yeah.
And you were the only Black woman in...
I was the only Black one there. Which wasn't a problem. They all loved me. They treated me, but everyone wanted me to act like the Black girl.
Yeah.
You have to be loud, you get praise. They wanted to know about, can I touch it? Blah, blah, blah. And, there were sometimes I would be on the phone with the patient, and I talk different on the phone because, there's a certain way you're supposed to speak on the phone. And when the patient arrives, it was like, oh, you're Black. Yeah. I am. So, it was just different. Yeah. But they never treated me weird or anything like that, but it was just different. So,
for me, I'm actually biracial, as most of you know. My mom is white, my dad is Black, but if people say to me, what are you? I'm black, because I live my life as a black man. I experience the black experience. I don't get a pat on the wrist because my mom is white. When I get pulled over by cops for whatever reason, sometimes I need to be pulled over because I'm speeding. I'm not gonna lie. But if I'm pulled over by cops, you know what I'm saying? They're not like, hey sir, is your mother white? Are you half white? No, they're not doing that. You know what I'm saying? It's like they see a black man or a Hispanic, which is also a minority. You know what I mean? And so you don't get a break there either. You know what I'm saying? I've also dealt with the whole, you know, like you said, Ian, not being white enough for white people, but also black people not really considering me black either. But that also stems from years and years of oppression and slavery. And if you're a house slave or a field slave, I'm gonna say something else. If you're a house slave or a field slave, you know what I mean? And that started that whole colorism and race war within the black community. And so I've dealt with that as well too, but definitely a black man, you know what I'm saying? And I think the black experience in America, and I think sometimes it's hard for white people or non-black people to understand when we say that. No, we don't want to be victims. No, we don't want to be victims of anything, but this is our truth, and this is what it is. We've experienced so much, and it just is what it is. And so tonight we want to, you know, just dive a little deeper and talk about that, and really talk about like what we, I hate to say as believers, because this is what we as people and as human beings should be doing anyway, but we as a body of believers can help impact change in the world and make a difference. So I want to talk to you, Joel, and you, Bit, because although you guys are Hispanic, you would say you've received white privilege, right? Yeah. And so some people say white privilege is not a thing. You know, some people would say, I've worked hard for everything that I've got in my life. And while that may be very, very true, I promise you, you probably didn't have to work harder for it because you were black.
Definitely.
You know what I mean? So tell me about that. How has being white passing, is what we would call it, affected you? How does that for you in America?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a person who, for like my entire life, has been somebody who kind of works, kind of what you said, kind of works towards everything that they want to get in life. And a lot of the times I can look back and be like, oh, I think I did everything like that. And it was a lot of me doing all the hard work and doing everything that I needed to do. But then my perspective changes when I hear stories like Ruth's story, and like stories like Ashley saying, and stories like Tiff saying, and like stories that when people say stuff like, oh, you're black and I thought you were white, just because of your name, or because I'm not going to give you a job because this is not what I expected. And that's just something that I've never experienced. And it's interesting because racism the idea is like race. I think a lot of racism has to do with a lot of perspective and how people look at you. And I think that that's a lot of the reason why we do have racism, because I'm 100% Hispanic. I'm 100% Puerto Rican. My mom is very much looks like a very Puerto Rican person, and my dad is like the biggest Puerto Rican personality you'll ever meet in your life. And I came out white. I just did. And my parents even told me on the phone yesterday, or when I was talking to them, when they were saying, you don't experience kind of what even we experience. And because when I was talking to them about oppression and everything like that, she was like, I don't think you realize that we've experienced some things like that when we've gone. And I'm their kid, which is weird, because I think it's something that I should be feeling if I'm from the same family, but it's not. It's almost not even it's a perspective, because your skin is just darker. And that's the worst part about it, because it doesn't even have anything to do with almost sometimes your background. It literally has to do with my perception of you. And that's something that I think is super detrimental. And I've 100% received white privilege. I mean, when I hear, the only way I can say that I think that I've received white privilege is when I have a conversation with you, Will, and you say, I'm going to have to teach my daughters how to put their hands out the windows when they're getting stopped by cops. And I was like, wait, what? You know what I'm saying? Like, I was like, I'm Puerto Rican. Why would I? It's like, no, I look white. So I get that white privilege. So my parents have never needed to sat me down and be like, this is how you handle cops. Because every time I've been pulled over, I've gotten out of a ticket. Every time. Which is just interesting to think about when I have conversations with people where the story is different and the story looks a lot sad. So I think a lot of it is a perspective shift that we need to change if we want to change like the culture and how everything's going right now.
Yeah.
Similar to Joel, I'm 100% Hispanic, but I look like just a white dude.
Yeah.
Like you would not be able to tell. I probably look more Jewish than I look Hispanic.
You definitely look like a Jew.
But it's interesting because I feel like for Latinos who have white skin, there's almost a double privilege of you get to hang with people of like your heritage or people of color, but you also get the privilege of being a white person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I feel like the perspective just goes deeper and deeper, and in terms of how kind of messed up it is that the color of your skin can either make things easier for you or make things way harder for you.
Yeah.
So I remember when I was younger, I used to say like, oh, like white people can't dance. Like, and my dad looks at me and he goes, you know you're white. And that's something, it just all has to do with how you look, which is, again, the crazy thing.
Yeah.
That just your appearance can give someone a perspective of you that's totally false.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think trying to change that is basically realizing who you are as a person has nothing to do with how you look or like what that projects.
Yeah. So when we say, Jared, you've experienced the same thing too because you're Cuban.
Yeah, I'm Cuban Puerto Rican.
Yeah, I mean, I no lie, when I first met Jared, right? So Jared was singing on the youth team, and when I heard him sing, I was like, man, white boy, you can sing. You can sing. And he was like, well, actually, I'm Cuban. I was like, man, stop lying. And he was like, no, I'm Cuban. And I'm like, for real? What has your experience been?
So mine's a little bit different. So I was raised, for the first couple of years of my life, I was with my mom, my single mom, and then with my grandparents while my mom was in the military. So I was raised very, very Hispanic, very Spanish was my first language. I knew how to speak Spanish very well. If you see any videos of me when I was little, I have the heaviest little accent you'll ever see. It was just, that was how I was raised. And then my mom's crazy. Y'all know my mom. I love my mom. You guys love my mom. She's a character, and she raised me in the way that a lot of our colored friends were raised, which is if a cop stops you, you listen to everything he says, you make sure your hands are off the steering wheel, you turn off everything, to have that fear of police officers saying they're not going to be looking out for your good, you need to be taking care of yourself and make sure you do everything beyond good, So growing up, when I went to school, I went to a lot of minority schools, so I didn't really go to an all-white school until I went into high school, and so all my life I've only been around people that look like us, right? So a lot of Spanish kids, a lot of black kids, a lot of people that were living in poverty, not really living in areas like we live in now, and so I didn't really I just thought this is normal, I didn't really, and I had an almost disdain towards white people. I almost had I will never mess around with someone that looks white because they're not who I am. And I almost couldn't even tell that that's how I look. I look like a white man, So all my life I'm saying, oh, I have this dislike of white people. Yeah, I look like one, So when I got to high school and I saw a lot more white kids, again, I was like, I'm not gonna go hang out with those guys because they don't act like me. They don't understand what I went through. And honestly, I didn't have what you had, Ian, which is that I was too white for the black kids. It was almost as soon as I told this story earlier, but my friend was talking to me, and he was like, as soon as you open your mouth, your privilege went out the door, because I just didn't talk like a white person, you know? I wasn't raised like that, so I don't talk like a white person, but I look like one. And so it's just, for me, it's been this weird, like, I don't know exactly where I fit, because I am 100% Spanish. I am 100% Hispanic. I do understand the struggle. I lived in, you know, not the best neighborhoods. I went to school in the not the best neighborhoods. And now that I'm at a more privileged place, now that I actually understand how the world works, I do get privilege. I do, because of the color of my skin, people like you will understand, hey, this guy's white. But it's like, no. And I think the problem is that we, like Joelle was saying, it's a skin thing, right? Like, we see the color of your skin and we already make a story about you. And so you have no idea what people are struggling with behind their skin, you know? And that's why I felt like, for me growing up, and something my mom always pushes, like, forget the labels. Forget what the world's trying to tell you you are. You are who Jesus tells you you are. And at the end of the day, black, white, whatever, we are made in his image, and it's perfect, you know? Yeah. So we should be able to look beyond that and say, well, even if you're Hispanic and you look white, I'm gonna delve in to see what your story is rather than what your skin is, you know?
I wanna ask Miranda, Catherine, Izzy, of course, because you guys are white. Can you think of a moment where you, after hearing stories like this, can you think of a moment where you're like, oh man, I've been receiving white privilege. I definitely get white privilege. Because we all know it's a thing and realize it's a thing, but can you think of a moment specifically where maybe you had a black friend and they didn't get what you got, or something, you know, like when we say white privilege, what comes to your mind?
Okay, I'll go. Oh, sorry. Okay, so I'm like the whitest, like, of the white people. Like, that's my last name. Like, I'm typical, like, 10% German, 10% UK, 2% milk, like, okay. But, like, I don't think, like, I used, like, when I heard white privilege, I used to be like, well, I work hard, so, like, or, like, I know black people who are richer than me, like, they got a Mercedes, so I used to kind of get offended by that, until someone explained it as, your life's not harder because of your skin color. But then I think it was like personal experiences, like people felt comfortable being racist with me because I was white. And I used to not speak up about it, but like the things I would hear, I'd be like, oh my God. Like, I was like, okay. So I would say like my biggest like aha moment was when I first got to college, and like if you're like a girl, everyone's like, don't go out late, like just be safe, like it doesn't end. So when I got to school, there was like a ton of police around, and I was like, oh, I feel safe. And I was walking with my black friend, and they're like, oh, you feel safe with all the police around? Like, that scares me. And I was like, oof. So then I just shut up, and I was like, that pizza was good. Like, I think that was like a big moment where I was like, ouch, like that like really brought it to me, and I was like I've like if I speed and a cop pulls me over, you know, I just see like the little white girl smile, and I'm like, hey, and then they let you they let you off, and I remember one time too, I was like working at Chick-fil-A, and I was like in the front of the store with only like 2 other people, and this like black man came in with a hoodie, and my manager came up to me and he was like, if you need to call the police, here's the red button by your register. And I was like, did he like do something before? And they're like, no, but like just so you're safe, Catherine. And I was like, at Chick-fil-A? Like, I was like, this is Christian chicken. Like, yeah, but so that's what I'm saying. It's like, or people being like, yeah, my mom won't let me date black boys because she doesn't want dusty kids. Like, like just, and like I've grown up like with black people all my life, like influencing me, and so that like it used to hurt me, and I'd stay silent about it, but like as a white person, you have to speak against it, and you have to hold people accountable.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And like what she said too,
I feel like people almost feel comfortable to be racist around me because they assume that because of my skin that I'm racist, and I'm like, no, you know, you can't treat people like that. I grew up in a city that was like close. There was a city next to mine that was very racist, and it was hard to live around there because, like, if I was with one of my black friends, like, or, you know, I grew up around black people all my life, so it's like I was also influenced by culture and minorities, and it's like I just learned that you can't treat people that way. You can't. Everyone is equal, and you can't. It's sad. Like I just don't understand. I'm at a loss of words, clearly, but like it's frustrating because I don't want to hear people talk, like hearing your stories, like I'm crying, like, because it's not fair that I can go in to any job and have an opportunity like handed to me when, you know, you walk in and you're struggling to when you were qualified, you know, and
it's happened to me a few times. So
yeah, it's not fair, and it needs to stop, and we all need to, like, I need to stand up, you know, and my people of my color need to stand up, like, because without people like who are white saying that this is wrong and we need to stop, like, it's not going to change anything.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, we all just need to come together. So.
Absolutely. And that's the whole point of this. This is not to gang up on one race or say white people are devils or nothing foolish like that, because we don't believe that. We don't, that's not what we're saying. We know that there are good white people, there are bad white people, there are good black people, there are bad black people. You get what I'm saying? But we do believe that in order to really see change in the world, it's going to take white people using their white privilege, using their white privilege as a platform to incite change in the world and in our communities. And I think this is a perfect segue, because I think some people may be watching this tonight and they may be saying, I don't believe in white privilege, and I don't believe in racism. Or they may say, okay, I get privilege and I understand slavery is wrong, but, you know, the law system is not racist. I think this is a perfect place for us to segue into a video clip of systemic racism. So we're gonna watch that and then we'll come back and talk some more about it, all right? Yeah, here we go.
This is Jamal. Jamal is a boy who lives in a poor neighborhood. He has a friend named Kevin, who lives in a wealthy neighborhood. All of Jamal's neighbors are African American, and all of Kevin's neighbors are white. Because Jamal's school district is mostly funded by property taxes, his school is not very well funded. His classrooms are overcrowded, his teachers are underpaid, and he doesn't have access to high-quality tutors or extracurricular activities. Kevin's school district is also funded by property taxes, so his school is very well funded. His classrooms are never crowded, his teachers are very well paid, and he has access to high-quality tutors and lots of extracurricular activities. Kevin and Jamal live only a few streets away from each other. So how come they're growing up in such different worlds with such different opportunities for success? The answer has to do with America's history of systemic racism. To understand it better, let's look at what life was like for Kevin and Jamal's grandparents. Decades after the Civil War, many government agencies started to draw maps dividing cities into sections that were either desirable or undesirable for investment. This practice was called redlining, and it usually blocked off entire black neighborhoods from access to private and public investment. Banks and insurance companies used these maps for decades to deny black people loans and other services based purely on race. Historically speaking, owning a home and getting a college education is the easiest way for an American family to build wealth. But when Jamal's grandparents wanted to buy a house, the banks refused because they lived in a neighborhood that was redlined. So Jamal's grandparents were not able to buy a home, and because colleges could prevent them from attending through legal segregation, their options for higher education were really scarce. Kevin's grandparents, on the other hand, got a low-interest loan to buy their first house and got accepted into a handful of top universities, which traditionally only accepted white students. This opened up a wealth of opportunities that they were able to pass on to their kids and grandkids. Even as late as the 1980s, an investigation into the Atlanta real estate market showed that banks were more willing to lend to low-income white families than to middle or upper-income African-American families. As a result, today, for every $100 of wealth held by a white family, black families have $5.04. A 2017 study confirms that redlining is still affecting home values in major cities like Chicago today. This explains how Kevin and Jamal inherited vastly different circumstances. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. A big part of systemic racism is implicit bias. These are prejudices in society that people are not aware that they have. Let's go back to Kevin and Jamal. Against all odds, Jamal manages to be the only student from his high school to get accepted into a great university, the same one that Kevin and his high school friends are attending. But after Kevin and Jamal both graduate, Jamal notices that his resume isn't drawing as much interest as Kevin's, even though they graduated from the same program with the exact same GPA. Unfortunately for Jamal, studies show that resumes with white-sounding names get twice as many callbacks as identical resumes with black-sounding names. Implicit bias is one of the reasons why the black unemployment rate is twice the rate of white unemployment, even among college graduates today. You can see evidence of systemic racism in every area of life. The disparities in family wealth, incarceration rates, political representation, and education are all examples of systemic racism. Unfortunately, the biggest challenge with systemic racism is that there's no single person or entity responsible for it, which makes it very hard to solve. So what can you do? The first thing you can do is work towards becoming more aware of your own implicit biases. What are some prejudices that you might hold that you're not aware of? Second, let's acknowledge that the consequences of slavery and Jim Crow laws are still affecting access to opportunity today. As a result, we should support systemic changes that create more equal opportunities for everyone. Increasing public school funding and making it independent from property taxes would be a great start, so that poor and wealthy districts can receive equal access to resources. Systemic problems require systemic solutions. Luckily, we're all part of the system, which means that we all have a role to play in making it better. Peace.
Well, that's that on that, huh?
Yeah.
What do y'all think about that?
That was the first time I've ever heard of redlining, like ever in my life. No one's ever taught me that. I don't think my school taught me anything about that or anything like that.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've never heard of communities being segregated for any reason and money going a certain places by just decisions by people who are in power that maybe like we didn't realize we were voting for, or like people like that. So yeah, that was the first time I ever heard it.
Catherine, you took a whole class on it, right?
Yeah, so like last fall I took a class on like race law in American cities, and yeah, it was like really eye-opening because I hadn't heard of redlining either, because like it's not an issue to me. Like I live in an upper middle class suburb, but I mean basically there was red zoning, and that's where there were certain neighborhoods, and it wasn't just black and white. There was black, and they like almost ranked minorities in this way. There was like black, which was red, which is called like red zoning. Then there were Hispanic districts. Then there were Asian districts, which was supposed to be like the closest to white, and then you had white people. And so like when you had the white flight of people leaving inner cities, white people could afford to have cars to drive to the inner city to work. That's why suburbs came about. And so Shelley v. Kramer was the Supreme Court case that knocked that out. There wasn't explicit racial discrimination, but you can still discriminate by seeing a black person and saying, you don't even have to explain why you're not giving someone a loan, or thinking like, oh, they might make this neighborhood more dangerous, or we don't have enough credit history on them. And so that's redlining, and it still happens today. And then where the money goes into public schools by property taxes, that was a Supreme Court case in 1973, which was the San Antonio Independent School District versus Rodriguez. And so minority families came together and were like, this is racist because of red zoning. We have to live in certain areas of cities, and so our kids need the same access to public education that white kids are getting in the suburbs. If we're saying that education is the way out and we're not even providing money for that way out, and the Supreme Court actually sided with the school districts, and that set national precedent. So all that still happens today.
When it was talking about the loans and stuff, I worked for a financial institution for quite some time, and people would come and see me about loans. And It was the craziest thing. I thought I was losing my mind that literally I could have a black person and a white person. The black person actually has a higher credit score, better credit history, and the bank would give the white person the loan before they give it to the black person. And I'm not talking about 1 or 2 instances here. I'm talking about at least 10 to 20 that I could count. Because as a person who I would make my money by how many loans I could do, I worked in a black neighborhood. I worked in a black gentrified neighborhood where you guys all know what gentrification is.
Yes.
Those of you who don't, it's where, it's a predominantly black neighborhood. White people move in, raise property taxes, up the property values, renovate, do all these different things, and then eventually force the black people out because they can't afford to live there anymore because of all these different things that are built around. So the financial institution that I worked for was in the middle of all of that, in the middle of a neighborhood that was being gentrified. So literally on one side of a street, you may have a home that's valued for $600,000, but then you go 2 blocks over, and it's the projects. So my clients are the $600,000 loan people, and then so-and-so over here who, just like Jamal, went to school, got an education, is trying to do better for themselves, actually has a better credit score than these people, but the bank won't loan them any money. It's the craziest thing. I witnessed that day in and day out firsthand. Has anybody ever experienced redlining or that systemic racism in your own personal life, or have you seen it in someone else's, or the schools you went to, or did that video hit home for anybody?
Well, just looking at Tampa in general, you see Plant High School and King High School, or Robinson High School and Jefferson High School. These are 2 very different high schools in the same city, and they're very different because of the neighborhood that they're in and the funding that they get. And both these are like Tampa schools, but they just have different experiences just because of the neighborhood that they're in and the people who go there. And it's like right at home, just like do your research.
For me, I watch a lot of I did a lot of work with black women, and especially black women that struggle with being single moms and taking care of their children. And I've seen a lot of black single moms struggle with having brilliant children but cannot afford to get them the education that they deserve. I have a friend of mine who's a single mom, and she begs her daughter to get into sports or some type of other activity to kind of give her a leg up, or to work harder, to do the extra step to make sure that she gets access to the education that she deserves when she's going to college. And and I would watch her stay up at night crying, like literally in tears. For me, being a single woman, I don't understand what that means, but I could just sit in empathy and feel the tension, and feel the weight of her struggle of like, how am I going to pay for college? How am I going to give my daughter the access to the education that she deserves? How can I afford that? How can and knowing that she understands why she has to struggle with that tension, because she's black and her daughter's black, and her daughter can get King High School education, and her daughter goes to King right now, and she's like, and she's thriving at King. She gets good grades, and she's in extracurricular activities, but she's still very scared. Her mom and my friend, she's still very, very scared because she's like, she's gonna go to college, and she might not get accepted because of this and because of that. And she's considering all of these things because she's had to face these things, and she knows what her daughter is gonna have to face. So she's carrying the weight that her daughter hasn't even faced yet, and it's disappointing because maybe a white parent don't have to worry about these things, and the only reason why she's worrying about it is because she's black and because her daughter is black, and it's tremendously sad to know that is the only thing. Her daughter has straight A's, everything. She has all of the intelligence to get through or to get to the education she deserves, but because of her skin color, she will be fiercely limited.
Yeah, in the last 2 years, I moved from Bruce B. Downs to the edge of Fletcher. So right off of Fletcher, like right off the highway. So like I'm not in Fletcher right now. So I'm still on the highway and everything. I was still close to my high school. Well, in this last year, for the past 4 years, I've stayed at Freedom High School and everything, and like I've been doing all my enrollment stuff. Like for the past 2 years, I've been at HCC, and like doing early admission and everything like that. Well, in this final year, I guess they found out that I had switched schools, and so they wanted me to get out of Freedom and go to Chamberlain. Chamberlain is not a great school. It's not like a great rated school, and it was actually farther from me than Freedom, because I was just off the highway. Exactly. Yeah. So they were trying to get me to go to Chamberlain, even though I was closer to Freedom, and I had just moved to the edge of Fletcher. Like, I mean, it's less than probably like 3 miles. Like, it's not a big change, you know. Like, and it's just kind of like, again, I'm not entirely sure. This is the first time I've heard about this, but to me, it sounds weird that I've been doing great in school. I've always done great in school, and it's like I changed my address, and now suddenly I have to go to a school that's farther away from me. That's a lower rated school, even though I've been here for 3 years already. Like it was wild, and luckily, I mean, God really blessed me, and I didn't have to move. I said, I'm in early admission, so I'm not even attending the high school, you know, like I just need it to be on my paper saying I go here so that I can get my education for free for college. And so luckily I didn't have to do anything, but it kind of freaked me out that I might have to say goodbye to all this work that I've been doing just because I moved to a lower class neighborhood, you know?
That's crazy.
It's just like the mom who was imprisoned a couple of years ago, and who got in trouble because she lied and said that she lived in one place and she didn't. And there's things like these that single moms have to do so that they can get their children access to better education. And it's saddening because they don't have a system that would protect them, that would protect their children, that would do better for them, and they have to end up lying or putting their life in jeopardy for the sake of. She was
sentenced to jail for like 7-8 years.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, it was a big thing on the news.
Like, huge. That's how desperate. Like how desperate do you have to be? You know what I mean? Like you can see that this woman is desperately trying.
And what is really her crime? For 8 years, was she smoking weed? Was she selling weed? Was she selling drugs? Was, you know, like what was the crime that she would have to serve 8 years for trying to get her child an education? How is that wrong? I mean, those are kind of questions that we have to ask ourselves. Like, how can anyone sit and look at that situation and say, man, she was totally wrong for that? How could we even have that idea?
Yeah. You know, it makes me think of that particularly is how and I'm going to kind of segue, but with everything that's been happening in our country, well, first we know that cops killing black people is not new. It's just being filmed.
Yes.
You know, it's been going on for ever.
Yes.
It's just now being filmed because everyone's got an iPhone or an Android or whatever. I hope none of you have Androids. I'm kidding. No, because everyone has smartphones, so you can. All the Karens. No. So because everyone has smartphones, it's being filmed and it's being uploaded for the world to see a lot faster, and we can just see it. And I've been seeing all of these videos of how. Literally, I watched a video the other day. A guy was being detained by the police, black guy. He stops, puts his hands on his head, and they run up, batons drawn. One of the cops actually kicked him in the back, and they push him to the ground, and they all get on top of him. Then there's another video where a white guy has a freaking axe, and he's swinging it at the cops. And they're like, "Sir, put the axe down. Sir, don't make us do it. Don't make us do it." Like, are you kidding me? You know, it makes me think of like, really, what is her crime? But then
What
you
is
got
her crime?
homeboy over here
Yeah, with the
swinging
axe.
axes and like,
Yeah.
and they're like, we want to take you in peacefully. No, kick him in the back. He's actually trying to kill you.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I think I mention that because I think sometimes white people will say, I'm not a racist. And you're not. I know that not all white people are racist, but you can't turn a blind eye to the racism.
Yes.
There's too many instances of where, you know, black people are done one way and white people are done another.
Yeah.
And it makes me want to, I think this is a good place to segue into, and I want to hear from everybody because we're all, you know, different backgrounds, different races. But with everything that's happened recently with Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd, you know, how did that make you feel? You know, I remember this whole Ahmaud Arbery thing happened in February of this year. Nobody knew. No one knew until this video surfaced. No one was arrested until this video surfaced. I, as a black man, and this might be hard for whoever's watching to hear this, but it's my truth, and I have to speak my truth as a black man, in hopes that it would incite change. I, as a black man, cannot go. I can't have a dime bag of weed on me, much less go kill somebody and be arrested 3 months later.
Yes. Yeah.
It's the epitome of white privilege. It's the epitome of systemic racism.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you guys, with all this stuff that's been happening in the media, how has it made you feel? I know me personally, I have been so affected by it. My heart has been so heavy with Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd. Every day for work, I have a Zoom call with Pastor Brad, Stephanie, and Pastor Brian. And I knew that something was off with me, and I knew that emotionally I was just all up and down. And I was sitting on that call, and I remember Pastor Stephanie asking me, we were talking about stuff and talking about the race thing, and she just said to me, she said, Will, how do you feel? How are you? She just asked me, how was I doing? And I started talking, and I was just like, you know, man, it really sucks because as a black father to 2 black girls, 5 and 6, I'm going to have to sit them down and explain to them that this world is not for them. So, like, their hearts are so pure. They don't know anything about anything. They love everybody. And y'all, before I knew it, I was like weeping. Like couldn't even get it out. Couldn't even talk. That's the pain that I have felt with the death of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery. And then, you know, people want to do things like, well, George, I saw something online this week, and that's the other thing, is I haven't really been on social media because I can't handle it. My mental psyche, I can't handle it. I saw something where somebody was saying, oh, everyone's trying to make it seem like George Floyd is a martyr and he was this great person. We never said George Floyd was a great person, but what we did say was that he didn't deserve to have his life sucked out of him. He didn't. We watched the man die. And it makes me think, what was that case? I can't think of his name, where the white guy killed up like 9 people in a church and they took him to Burger King afterwards. What's his name? Do you remember? Dylan something? I can't think of it. It's leaving me right now. But George had what, a fake $20 bill, and I think they said he might have been under the influence. There's all these different narratives. We don't know because we weren't there. There's all these different narratives. But you kill a man because he's possibly high, possibly had a counterfeit bill.
Yeah.
Man goes into a church, kills 9 people.
Mm-hmm. 9 black people.
9 black people.
Mm-hmm.
A white man goes into a church and kills 9 black people. And you take him to Burger King before he goes to jail. I don't get it.
Yeah.
You said something, and I feel like God's just telling me this right now. You just said that you gotta sit your girls down and say, this world's not for you. And I think as followers of Christ, we have to understand, regardless of race, this world's not for us. And it's not for us because it wasn't for him. And we're gonna experience prejudice, we're gonna experience hate, we're gonna experience all the evil that could be thrown at us. And the reason for that is because they hated him first. If they couldn't even love Jesus, how can they love us? You know what I mean? And he told us this world's not meant for us. You know, he's preparing a place because he knows this one's not for us. And I don't know, what you just said just really struck me, because it's like, this is not our home, you know? And we as a society have this hustle mentality of, we want to get ahead, we want to be on top, we want to make sure that our kids are safe, we want to make sure, and it's like, none of us are safe. And because of sin, because of racism, because of hate, because of evil in this world, there's even more divide that makes us not safe, you know? But I think that there's hope in that, and understanding that it's not home for any of us, you know? And as believers, we get that hope of saying, if this world treats me like garbage, if this world throws me out and spits me out, I have a home that Jesus is preparing for me. I've got a room in his house that he's preparing for me. I don't know, just what you said just really, I felt like God wanted me to say that, because this world is not fair, but we have a God that cares for us anyway, you know?
Yeah. I piggyback on what Jared was saying, but can I take that a little bit deeper?
Yeah.
I think when you said that, it struck me because I'm a black girl. You know, I'm a black woman, but I'm a black girl. I'm Aubrey. I'm Parker. Because when you say the world is not for me, it means the world will not protect me. It will not fight for me. It will not speak up for me. It will consider, and this is not to disrespect my white sisters in the room, it will not consider me as valuable or as on an equal playing field than my white sisters. It would see, and I tell people this all the time, it would see race appropriation that Kim Kardashian can have braids and a built body and seen as beautiful and valuable, and she will get all the protection in the world. And it doesn't matter how beautiful or valuable I am, that my family or friends see me as, the world will not protect me because I am not Kim Kardashian. She might want to look like me. She wants my big lips. She wants my body. She wants my hairstyle. She wants to tie her hair like me, but she's not me. She will never walk in the path that I walk. She will never struggle with the same things that I struggle with. So the world is not for me, it's for her. And I think that's when you said that, that's what struck me the most, because, you know, and it's very sad, because, you know, here you have 2 beautiful daughters who have to sit with the reality that when they go out there, they're not seen as valuable. And it's not a truth that could be sugar-coated. It's not a truth that sadly can be patted on or prettied up. It's the raw truth. And we can't send our black girls out there thinking that it's okay. And it's not. Unfortunately, it's not. It's the society we live in. The world is just not going to protect them.
Yeah. Nick and Ian, how are you guys, being young black men, how were you affected by what's recently been filmed and put on social media?
Like, I guess I'll start. It's just crazy because I know with the Ahmaud video, I saw it kind of early, I feel like, from Sean King. He posted it, and I just, like, the first feeling I felt was angry, just like, wow, this is like just happening, and it's like 3 months later, like we're all finding out about it, and then terrified, because like I go for runs, like I literally just went for a run today, and that could be me if I was like in that neighborhood right there, wearing a white shirt, wearing like shorts, just like going for a casual run. That could literally happen to me. And then sadly, the third thing I thought was just like unsurprised. Like I've just gotten used to like hearing these stories, seeing it over and over again, and it's just like desensitized and just like not thinking anything. Like I never would have expected any of this stuff to be happening, with like people finally realizing just like the systemic racism and like all this stuff. And just I hate talking about it too, because like this is my life. Like this is what I always like have to deal with, and it's just, I don't know, it's just like terrifying and unsurprising. Like, that's it.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
When I first watched the Ahmaud video and then the George Floyd video, I was like, dang, that could be me. That could be me. I am a black man with a bigger stature for my age. I'm like a tall black guy. I'm bigger looking. I might come off as intimidating sometimes. And I go on runs too. I go on runs with Ian, and like,
oh, God forbid y'all together.
I know. And just we thank God we live in a great neighborhood. But what if we lived in a neighborhood in the deep South, in Georgia or in like North Carolina, where maybe people aren't as accepting as people are in New Tampa? And that could have just as easily been me, Ahmad. Ian could have been Ahmad. Or maybe I have on accident a $1 counterfeit bill, and then someone stops me, and I could have been George Floyd. Ian could have been George Floyd. We could have been. It made me cry.
Just the way we look. It's just, and like you were saying, you couldn't even handle like social media and like having to deal with all that. I literally deleted Instagram for like a few days just because I couldn't. In the very beginning of all this stuff, I was like, oh, I don't know where this is gonna go. It's just looking really divisive, and like people aren't gonna understand. Like I never thought I'd see systemic racism and like all this stuff about redlining pop up. Like I just felt like it was gonna be Black Lives Matter, like this matters, then the other side was saying all lives matter, and it's like, it's just, it's hard to deal with like over and over again. Hopefully this will like start a real change,
So, I mean, there's so many different things we could say about this, and we could go on and on and on all night about this, right? But one of the things that I love about the Gathering Church is that we look just like this. Literally, I've never been a part of a church so diverse. I remember when I first started coming, and I was like, is this a white church? Is this a black church? Oh, maybe it's a Spanish church. Then I saw some Asians. I was like, oh. And I saw Middle Eastern. I'm like, okay. Literally, it's the most diverse church that I've ever been a part of, and that's something that I take a lot of pride in. That, you know what I'm saying? That you have all these different races, and everybody feels welcome. I, as a person of color, have never felt anything but welcome at the Gathering Church, and I put that on our leadership, Pastor Brad, Pastor Stephanie, Pastor Brian. I've never felt anything but welcome here at the Gathering Church. So as we segue to a close, so we've sat here, we've shared our stories, we've shared our pain, we've shared our experiences, and what is it that we have to do as a church, as a body of believers, as Jesus followers, and just as decent human beings? What is it that we need to do to bring about change? What is it, someone asked me that the other day, and I said, honestly, as a black person, I don't know. I said, we've been rallying and protesting and walking and since the days of Martin Luther King and before, I really don't know. What is it? It's my personal belief that our white, as a black man, my white brothers and sisters in the body of Christ would begin to use their white privilege to speak out against these unjustly things that are happening in the world. And it's been my prayer, because Catherine, you mentioned the white guilt. I'm not trying to make any white person feel guilty. Right. The goal of this is to bring an awareness to what's happening in the world and the black struggle. Bring an awareness. And my goal is that through this, our white brothers and sisters would use their voice to speak up and to call out the injustice.
Yeah.
When they see it, when they hear it, call it out. Call it out. It's kind of like any sin that's done in private. It's easier for you to keep that sin and struggle with it.
Yeah.
But if I know, Ruth, that you're a drug addict, and I'm in your business, and I'm in your face, and I'm calling you out, and I'm checking you on it daily, you're less likely to struggle with that. You know what I'm saying? What is it that you all...
Just to piggyback off of what you were saying with our white brothers and sisters, my first run-in with racism, I was in 4th grade. And I went to a private school that had a lot of different ethnicities, but it was a K through 12 school. And there was at the time we lined up and after lunch. And there was this kid who was like 14, 15, and he looked at me and he said, hi. And I just kind of looked at him and said, hi. And he said, hi, N-word. And from the 2nd, 3rd grade, the kids that were in my class, we've been together for a minute. So we were in the same classes in 2nd grade and 3rd grade. So we were taught about the civil rights movement in those grades. We were taught about what was said, the things that, was done and all of that. And so they heard what he said. And I think I was kind of shocked by it because I've never had to deal with that until then. And even though they were white, they were Asian, they were Hispanic, they were like, we have to tell the teacher. And I was like, no, because I didn't want to draw any attention to myself. But no, we're going to tell the teacher. And we're at 9 years old. And my teacher was a white guy. And he was like, describe him to me. Tell me what he looked like and everything. So I guess he had already done things like this before. And they investigated and they were able to find him. He was suspended and all of that. But I think I wasn't as scarred by it because the people around me that were not black stood up for me. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I appreciated that. I don't even think I knew how much I appreciated it then, as much as I do now. And I have a different perspective of white people and other people who aren't black because of that. So I think sometimes white people think that because they're not black, their voices don't matter, and your voice does matter. It does help when you speak out about this kind of stuff.
It does.
I just want to say, it's us versus racism. Racism is evil. It's from the devil. Everyone counts. Everyone's voice counts. Doesn't matter if you're black, brown, Asian, white, anything. Is going to be defeated with numbers and with love and unity and action. Action is huge. Go vote, go talk about it, do what you got to do. But with all of us together, I have all hope. It won't be an issue 20, 30 years, hopefully.
And I was talking to Ashley before this, and she said, you don't vote based on Democrat, right? You don't vote based on what the person labels themselves as. Vote for the person that's going to represent you. Vote for the person that wants to hear change and wants to implement it. Because if someone's not open to hearing what's going on, they're not going to make a move. And I think that's what right now we're suffering from in this system, is that we have a system that's not listening despite the voices that are speaking. And we as people are the ones that are putting these people into power, you know? So we have to be careful about who do we want representing us, you know? Who do we want to implement change? Because if we're picking the wrong people, no change is going to get made, you know?
It's more than just having black friends, I think too. I think it's more than just being around people who don't look like you. I think it's being anti the people who are against those people, you know, and in those moments of oppression, which whether it's huge or whether it's very little and very minuscule, that person can go home with and deal with it the rest of the night and for weeks. And those moments are super important to implement change, I think being anti-racism is way more effective than just not being racist, you know? So.
And I think not only knowing who we're voting for and who we're giving that kind of power, it's also who we're investing our money to. There are still a lot of businesses that are ran by racist people, and I think not giving them that money to continue their business and have that platform, you know, so I think it's important to be informed about people and their actions.
And on a more personal level for people, just like, it's not just like posting a little thing on Instagram. It's not over there. It's not like showing up to one protest. It's like how you're gonna keep living your life. Like how are you gonna turn this passion into true action? Like what can you do to like keep living this, keep speaking that truth, and like empower as many more people as you can. Like that's what we really need to do moving forward. It's not gonna just end when this isn't like in our faces all the time. We gotta keep it going.
You know, actually, that we talked about earlier. What did Ahmaud Arbery, what his death meant? What did George Floyd said? What did that do for you? This past week, as a minority, because even despite my skin color, I am a minority. If I'm a minority and I identify as that, what am I doing to help those who are just like me? So like this past week, I've been posting nonstop. I've been praying nonstop on my social media. I've been like posting resources. I've just been doing everything I can to get more people activated. And this past week, I went to a peaceful protest in downtown, and they literally just said, "We just want to come together, people of all faiths, people of all races, and just pray." And it was one of the most beautiful experiences because we had a Muslim imam there, we had a Jewish priest, we had a bunch of different black churches there. We had just so much diversity, so many different doctrines, so many different, like just a lot of diversity. And it was like, no matter what we are or what we claim to be, we're going to take this moment right now to pray together for change. We're going to take this moment to stand together for change, because the problem is that it is us versus racism. It is unity despite racism. It is community despite those who are trying to oppress us. And if we're dividing ourselves because of issues, we're doing the work for them, you know? So.
I think something too, like, that I've been thinking about is like, I can post on social media and like I can do all of these things. Kind of like what Ian was saying is like, we can post a black square or whatever it is, but like something that's been really hitting me is like not racist. I've always been like, I don't know, just so close to it, and it's been really close to my heart, like racial injustice and all of that. And like just growing up, like it's always been something that I've thought about, but like also remembering like things that my parents told me that weren't racist things, but like being in like the projects or something, having their voice in the back of my head being like, be extra careful, or like when you're, you know, like not lying, if I'm out like at night and I see a big black guy, I'm probably going to be a little bit more afraid than I would if it was like a white guy walking, which is just things that I feel like were instilled through our parents and that are just not taught to hate other races or people because of the color of their skin, but it's more of like, it's those little things that are just like, be just extra careful, be a little bit safer, like be smarter, like. And so I think something as a white woman, like teaching my children, like once I start having kids, like teaching my kids and talking to my friends and just being, just like, you know, teaching them the love of Jesus and what it looks like to walk out justice and standing up and having a voice for my friends and the people around me. And but yeah, I just think it's like that's just what's been on my heart is like being a voice to my children, the people around me, and then as well as the other things of standing up for people and in those situations and stuff. But
And I mean, I think that's really awesome. You're gonna have brown children. You're married to a Brazilian. You know what I'm saying? So they ain't too much privilege they gonna have either. You know what I mean? So.
But to what she was saying too, I think some of this is based on fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
That implicit.
you know, so I think the more I have conversations with you, the less afraid I am.
Yeah.
You know, so I was listening to Dr. Tony Evans, and he was saying, talk to somebody different than you.
yeah.
Yeah.
That has a different belief, that looks different.
Yeah.
And that's how we come together, because if I'm used to being afraid of big white guys, but I have these conversations with big white guys, they are a little less intimidating.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So, but man, this was just so good. I want to thank all of you for coming tonight and sharing your story, sharing your truth, sharing your experience, and even white people to sit through this. I think too, you know, because you guys explained the whole white guilt thing, I think even sometimes it's hard to hear that maybe you are part of the problem, or subconsciously you didn't know your own ignorance. You know, Catherine, you mentioned there was a time where you were completely ignorant, and you know what I'm saying? But now your eyes have been opened. You know what I'm saying? You said you grew up, and I knew it because you got a lot of swag. When you said you grew up around black folks.
So she's too swag.
I knew you got a lot of swag. No, but you said you grew up around that. You know what I'm saying? And Izzy, you know, being honest enough to share, like, I was told this was ingrained in me, and how now you're going to do your part to disbar that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This has been a really, really awesome start to many conversations that need to be had to continue to bring about change in the world. And I thank you guys for coming and for being here. But before we let you guys go and we let our audience go, I just want to say a prayer. And just close out in prayer. Father, we thank you for tonight. We thank you for what you're doing in our church, in our community. Father, our prayer and our hope for this whole thing tonight was just to incite change in your people, to incite unity in your people, to put biases aside, to put race and color aside, but for us to all realize that we are all just children of God. We are all just children of God. That we're all important to you, that you would leave the 99 just for the one. Thank you for that, Father. Thank you. Thank you for coming to get me, the one. Father, we pray for our cities, our nation. Father God, that the eyes of our understanding would be open, and that city leaders and officials and people in high places in government and the president, that we would begin to see people and see situations the way that you see it. That racism would change. That though it may never fully be eradicated, Father God, that we will see your love in the world. We will see your hope in the world. Some sort of change in the world, Father God. I pray for every person here tonight that shared, that listened, that you would bless them, that you would be with them. We pray for change in law enforcement, that it would be better than what it is. We thank you for what you're doing in the Gathering Church. We love you, we praise you, we give you all glory, all honor. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Good night, Facebook. We love you. Thank you for joining us and for being a part of the conversation. Have a great night.